And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you came back because you wanted more. Folks, that was a brilliant decision because we have a lot more for you. Now, why do we have so much more for you? Because this is the podcast. It's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And our guest today, you cracked the code, is a podcaster. That's right. Folks, this is the place where we all come to raise each other up, and this is the place where the rising tide truly raises all ships. So let's get sailing and introduce our guest today, the host of the Freshman Foundation podcast, Michael Huber. Michael, how you doing, brother? And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rory. It's good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you coming on again. I had the privilege of having Michael on one of my other podcasts, and he was gracious enough to come back on this podcast and talk about his podcast. So, totally different conversation, but same awesome guy. So, Michael, tell us a little bit about you, what you do, that type of thing, and we'll get rolling.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a father of two teenagers, so that's my number one job. But in professional life, I am a mental performance coach. So think sports psychology. I work with young athletes and help them on their mental game, trying to solve problems, be more mentally and emotionally skilled to be able to handle some of the pressures that come with being a young athlete nowadays. So it's my favorite thing in the world to do besides be a dad, and I love to talk about it.
Nice. Love that. Absolutely love that. And along with that, you have the podcast, the Freshman Foundation podcast. So tell us kind of how that got started, what led you down that direction, and that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thank you for asking that. So the podcast started in 2021 as I was launching my mental performance coaching practice. I had made a pretty clean break from a first career that was completely unrelated. And I was trying to figure out through the COVID period how to market this new business I was building. And so, because I was such an avid consumer of podcasts and as a form of entertainment for me, I was like, I love podcasts. I love long form interviews. I love getting into the weeds with people. Like, what if I was the guy that had those conversations that I could share those with people who might be interested and try to educate? So that was the genesis of the podcast. So I started it in early 2021, and here we are in 25, and it's still going.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, that's a long time. How many episodes do you have in there, give or take?
Roughly 85-ish.
Okay.
I'm on episode 83, but I got a couple of remixes and bonuses. So I'm closer to 90. But yeah, I told myself I would just get to 100. If I get to 100, then everything else after that is gravy. So I don't give up easily, put it that way.
No, you're definitely on your way, brother. You're going to be at 100 before, probably before the end of this podcast. You'll be at 100. What are you talking about? So no, I love that. You and I were having a really awesome conversation in the pre-interview, and you were telling me a little bit about kind of your journey with the podcast and some things you'd been through and some things that you'd kind of realized. You care to tell everybody else about that? Is that cool to fill everybody else in on that? Because that was some awesome stuff you were talking about.
100%. I'll try to be succinct in terms of like recapping it. But the reason I got started with the podcast too is I got marketed to. Somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn, I believe, in 2020 saying, "Hey, you should do a podcast." And I was like, "Hey, that sounds great. I love podcasts." And so I kind of heard their pitch, and it was basically this full outsourced solution where they set me up and they got me going on a podcast. They did all the editing, they did everything, and I just showed up and I interviewed people, which was great in that it introduced me to podcasting. But in retrospect, I also realized I didn't need to do that and spend all that money. But that was sort of what got me started. And then I went through that, and then I started to figure out how to do the podcast on my own because I couldn't afford to pay those people anymore. So then I started to take on different, independent contractors. I have an editor. I had real people, video people, and I figured it out that way. But eventually, after a couple of years, I started to slow down in the cadence of publishing episodes. I was burning out. I was taking on guests. I didn't tell you this, but I was taking on guests that didn't really fit the core mission. I was just doing interviews to do them, to get content out, but it wasn't really like laser focused.
Yeah.
And so put all those things together around episode 60 or 70. I was just like, I don't know, I can't do this. And I stopped doing it all together. I was dropping an episode every like 4 to 6 months. But then I figured out how to do it on my own using a platform that like is AI sort of powered. And now I do everything by myself. So I'm like, well, now I need to do more podcasts. So I've dropped 3 or 4 new episodes in the last, month or two. And like I'm back on an every other week cadence. So I'm feeling really good about that. But it's been a total roller coaster because it was really hard to stay with it. It's expensive, time consuming. And as much as I love being an interviewer and talking to people, like it just burned out on it, but I didn't want to stop doing it. So I had to find a new solution.
All right, can't figure out how to work my mute button. The guy's mowing the lawn outside. All right. Anyway, no, I love that. I love that conversation that we were having because it's so like it happens to everybody and nobody ever wants to talk about it. We all hit that point, man, where we're just kind of like you're going through the motions or you're out of creativity and you're like, okay, all the laws of the universe say you must put out content. So I'm taking an interview just to take an interview. Brother, it's like we've all been there, but I don't ever get to hear the part of the story where it's like, yeah, I came out the other side and here's what happened. And, I got this new thing. And I've seen you a lot more out there, social media and everything else, been noticing, your stuff you've been doing. And so I was going to ask you about that when we got on today. Like, hey, you seem like you sort of renewed, vigor. Um, are you going to, what's your plan for the podcast now that you're kind of feeling back into it? Like, let's go.
That's actually it's a great question because I've been thinking about it, right? Like and I follow along with other podcasters to see how they're doing things. And there's one podcaster in particular who I get the sense that she's formulating the questions before the guest, right? Meaning she's like, these are the questions I want to have answered for me. And
Hmm.
now I'm going to go find the people that can answer those questions versus finding the people and then having the interview and then backing into the theme, right? And I think that's where I'm going next is like, let me take that curiosity and really find the questions that I want to answer, whether it's from me, for my selfish reasons, or for my audience, but really curate the question and then go find and pitch the right person versus like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Come on, we'll talk. And yeah, they're always valuable conversations, but they're not laser focused on trying to get questions answered that people really want to know. And so I think that's where my next step is going is to be a little bit more intentional in curating the content.
I love that because you're trying to serve a particular audience. A particular, type of person is listening to your podcast. They're looking for a specific area of information, right? Do you know who? I mean, I'm sure you know. I didn't mean to phrase it that way. You've been doing this a long time. Can you share with us, who is sort of the target market that you have been looking for, or maybe the one that you want to go after now that you're like refocusing, what you're doing?
No, I think my target market always all along was the parents of young athletes.
Right,
Do teenagers listen to podcasts? Maybe, but they probably don't listen to a 40 to 45-minute podcast.
right,
I'm really gearing it toward the parent who's more probably predisposed to listen in the car or on a commute to work, who's the decision maker, right? They're the ones with the purse strings and really engaging them in that conversation. One, so they get the answers that they want, right? They're the ones I want to educate. And two, like for them to feel like they know me. That was also, I didn't share that with you, but that was a big part of my premise because in my listenership as a podcast listener, I resonated with the people who I felt like I knew, right? Even though I never met them, I never knew who they were, but I felt like they were a friend. And like, I wanted to be that friend. Like, I wanted to be the guy that, like, you did never met me before, but you can trust me. You believe in what I'm saying. Like, you think you know me. And you probably do because I'm a pretty authentic guy, but like that was the model, right? And so I want parents to feel like, hey, I can have a conversation with this guy. He's gonna have the best interest of my family and my child at heart. He cares about what he does. Like he wears his heart on his sleeve and he'll do anything for you. That's what I want people to get from the conversations, not just a 35-second reel on Instagram where I'm a talking head. Like I just don't do very well with that.
nice. Nice. I'm sure you're going to hit that, man. And I mean, even right now, you've just got this like energy coming off you when you're talking
Mhm.
about it. I love it, man.
I
It's
feel it.
uh it's fantastic. Now the podcast, I know that there's an educational component to it because you bring experts on, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. They talk about, your topics, sports and mental focus and these types of
Mm-hmm.
things. But you also you have a business though that you're also running. And so how do you use the podcast in terms of promoting the business or the business promoting the podcast? And, how do you promote them both? In terms of your promotion and how you work the synergy of everything together, how does that podcast work alongside what you're trying to do in the business world?
Um, that's a good question. And I think it's something that I'm always trying to do better. And frankly, I'm not sure I'm really great at it. I think that was part of my paralysis, just to sort of backtrack a bit. Part of my paralysis was like, I don't think what I'm putting out is really valuable to the target audience that I want to promote to. So I've really tried to focus on getting information that parents like me, a teenage parents, I'm a parent too, that they would really want to hear. Nutrition, training, recruiting, things that I'm not expert in, but that come into play in the work that I do with young athletes, right? Sort of finding that ecosystem, that community of people that sort of would support what I do, right? I think the thing that, and I think I do a good job of that because I am curious and I'm knowledgeable enough about those tangential topics that I can really talk in a knowledgeable way where we get really granular. So we start to get into some really specific issues to answer questions. It's not very generic, which I don't like generic at all. The thing I could do better, and maybe we'll talk about this, and maybe it was on your list of questions. I don't do a lot of solo episodes, and I'm really like, I want to do more authoritative solo episodes about my work and my expertise. And I'm really uncomfortable with it. Like, I'm uncomfortable being on the mic by myself, just
And we got dropped for a minute, but hey, we're back. You guys all know I don't edit, and this is one of the reasons why, because we get funny moments like this. Ever since Zoom added that AI, boy, they just drop you in the middle of nowhere for nothing. So here we go. Mike, I appreciate you being such a great sport about it. And you were in the middle of telling us all kinds of stuff about how you use it for business and how they relate.
Mhm.
Wherever you need to pick up, brother, we're here. The floor is yours. Go for it.
Yeah, I think I was just talking about how I want to do more solo episodes and be able to be more authoritative and kind of talk about my work more specifically and not rely so much on the guest format, right? I think the last thing I would say about using the content is I have also become more targeted about where I share the content, right? And maybe your listeners can relate to this, and obviously everybody's customers are different and everybody's audience is different, but for me, the place where most of my listeners live, I believe, is on Facebook. Parents are on Facebook. That's just historically the case, and I've resisted Facebook forever. And then I was like, no, I need to be there. And so I started to be much more intentional, not just about posting to my feed, but going into groups and engaging people and posting into the groups where the people who are going to buy the services are going to be, and sharing value, right? Sharing, pointing them to these conversations that are free and they're valuable and they give them content that they can consume to be better parents and help their child and feel like, hey, I'm adding something to the conversation. So I've been doing that and it's been working. I feel like it's been working. Maybe not like it's not changing, life changing, but I'm in the right, I feel like I'm in the right place. Whereas I think I tried too hard to be in other places that it was sort of like yelling into a black hole a little bit more.
Right, right. I love your answer, and I mean, I've listened to a lot of your episodes, back and forth. I that actually was a question I had was if you were going to be doing solo episodes, type of thing. The you do a really good job of when you're the host on the program of not like taking over the conversation. You really let your guest, tell their story, come talk. It's like, hey, I brought you here to talk about this, so go ahead and talk about it. I'm not going to get in your way. And the upside to that is you get a great guest interview experience. The downside is you never get to teach or, promote yourself for your business. And so that's what those solo episodes are for. Yeah, is for you to go out there and show your expertise. But you said you're uncomfortable with them. Just out of curiosity, between you and me and the fence post, what is it that bothers you about it, or can you put your finger on it?
I just think it's the lack of feedback, right? That lack of feedback, that there's no bounce back, right? So I'm just talking and I'm like, am I going in the right direction? And it doesn't make sense. There's really no like frame of reference. Um, but I think the thing that I've learned on this sort of second run, if you will, with the podcast is it's my podcast. I can be a little bit more selfish. So what I mean by that is you're right. I do go out of my way to put my guests first in the interview.
Yeah.
And when I interject my point of view, it really is to emphasize the work that I do, but how it ties to what they're saying, right? And like
Right.
make that connection point. But what I am doing more of is I'm posting more clips from these episodes of me alone rather than just posting clips of my guest exclusively, which I did in the beginning, where I was like, well, I need to promote them. And I'm like, well, this is my podcast. If I have something good to say from an episode, I need to put it out there and sort of balance it. And so, like, I've definitely gotten more comfortable with, like, hey, you're doing the work, you're spending the money, you're not asking anybody for anything, you're not charging them a fee or whatever, right? You're just giving them a platform. If I want to be selfish about promoting myself, I can do that. I don't have to, make everything about the guest. I'm not a professional podcaster like you are. Right. So like I think it's really my perspective is grown on the business. But I think ultimately at the core of it, I just love the conversations. I come out the backside of a podcast conversation, and I'm sure you can relate to this. I feel like the person I speak to, I may have never spoken to them before, and I feel like I know them.
Hmm.
Right. That doesn't
Oh,
even
yeah.
happen in real life a lot of the time. You have small talk, whatever. If I spend an hour talking to somebody I've never met, this deep conversations, like I feel like I know this person. Like there's something really valuable about that connection that's established in a podcast conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I love the whole premise of that entire answer, and that is that it's my podcast. And you know what? It's really funny to me. I'm getting kind of a reputation for this at this point because I really am sort of raging against the machine. There are so many people who think that there are rules. Like you just said, this is my podcast. Okay, so if I want to post this or this, I can.
Yeah.
It's your rules, So I love the fact that you're going, hey, I'm still gonna make this great for the guest, but if I want to put something out for me, I'm gonna. There's so many people who feel like that's wrong. Did you feel kind of that way, like it was wrong to do for some unknown reason before you decided, hey, it's my podcast?
Yes, I did. I felt like I had to please my guest. Right. And
Yeah,
and I didn't, I was it was I had a disproportionate view of the value, right? Like I felt like they were really valuable to me, but I wasn't really valuable to them or to the audience.
yeah,
And I'm like, no, that's not true, right? This is a conversation. And yes, I'm inviting them on, but my point of view in this, whether it's as the question asker, right, as the interviewer, or as the person who sort of adds value in the conversation, it's 50-50. And I'm the one making the investment. So I just got a little bit more balanced view. And I think some of the downslide in the cadence of the podcast and some of the troubles I was facing, like some of the challenges, refocused me. It's like, hey, like you want to keep this going, you need to be more selfish. If you're not more selfish, you're going to burn out and you're not going to do it. So give yourself a little bit more credit, give yourself a little bit more airtime, promote yourself too. And now you're going to have the motivation to show up and be like, hey, this is worth it for me to do it versus feeling like I'm doing it all for somebody else and I'm just posting it on my site and trying to make them look good. I love promoting people, but like at a certain point, you got to get a return on your investment, and that includes being a little bit selfish. And I'm not gonna apologize for that.
no, you shouldn't. I applaud it actually very loudly. So I love that. I want all podcasters to just take ownership of their podcast and stop listening to the imaginary voices in our heads about how things should be. I just think it's fantastic. So as let's go back just a minute because I also really like the part where you kind of looked over your social media. Everybody feels like they have to post on every platform all the time, no matter what, every day. And there's some if you don't know where your audience is, then that's not a bad thought because you post everywhere and you see where you grow and then you follow that. You've identified your social media and where it should be, and you're focusing your time there. So, in terms of your podcast and your product and the people you're looking for, you said Facebook. Now, is it pretty much all Facebook or is it Facebook with a little Instagram? What's your formula you're following, for your posting that works for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I definitely still post on Instagram because the athletes are there, right? And so even though they may not be listening to full podcasts, they are watching clips, right? There is a following there mutually, right? I follow certain athletes, age dependent and situation dependent. They follow me. I want them to know that I'm in the marketplace doing this and I can help them. But they're probably not listening to the podcast, right? So if you had to like, put my feet to the fire, I'd say Facebook is where I would go, but it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I put stuff on YouTube and I have a channel. And then LinkedIn has sort of been the one that's kind of, I don't say let me down, but it's really hard for me to figure out because there are buyers, there are people who are interested, parents with careers on LinkedIn, but I've just had very little success being there. And maybe a part of it's just me not understanding how to use it. So I'll take responsibility. But I think it's really more for a lot of, for lack of a way to say, it's more for professional uses than it is for sales, at least in the work that I do. I'm not B2B, I'm B2C. So like I'm trying to get the consumer. If you're business to business, it might be a little bit better. I've just had a really hard time finding the value and like being consistent and dedicating a lot of time and energy to LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, I understand. Another question I usually ask folks is about monetization. I don't think I saw any of that in your podcast, but you do sell your services and stuff. So
Yes.
the podcast for sure is a marketing arm for you. Yes.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Right. And then do you have any additional monetization for the podcast itself or any thoughts on that?
No, no, that's a great question. No, I think I've always just assumed that my downloads are too modest to get any sort of direct sponsorship. I probably could, and I've never tried. I think the other thing that I'm starting to see in some of the like marketing I do, like through like newsletter, like I'm using the podcast to promote my newsletter to grow my audience client list to get more potential leads through the newsletter. And I'm also seeing a lot of like newsletter partnering out there. So like that kind of partnership or collaboration idea, like where I could promote other podcasts, is probably something that I should think about doing. But to answer your question, I've been really awful about monetization, which is probably part of the reason why the podcast died out for a bit because I wasn't making any money off of it.
Well, and it's a tough thing to kind of break into, I know, because everybody has that same idea, like you just said. Oh, I don't have enough downloads for that because this is what this said or this is what this said. So I totally get where you're coming from. And yeah, you don't need downloads. So look into monetization, brother. You've got a podcast that's popular enough, big enough. You got the right connections. You could get that thing monetized, man. You certainly could. But I love the honesty about it. So thank you for sharing that too. There's a lot of people out there who feel like you feel about it. As we kind of move forward through the podcast, the let's see. Now, do you have a course or
Yeah.
thing you do? Because I know you do coaching. How does that all work? I want to make sure we get that out to everybody.
Thank you for asking the question. So the backstory, which I, of course, ignored, was the Freshman Foundation. The podcast was geared specifically to help athletes transition from high school to college athletics. And the reason why that was is because I had seen it in some of the work I was doing where I was curious about what does it look like for this standout high school athlete to now go to the next level on their own, where everybody else is a standout. How are they going to handle it? How do they prepare themselves for that? So the podcast initially, if you listen to my first 10 to 15 episodes, it was really hyper focused on that transition. And then, like I said, it kind of morphed into like more generic topics that weren't, it was more about my coaching. It was more about the ecosystem. And I really started to move towards like, hey, I just want to get coaching clients. But I have a course that's geared toward the transition from high school to college athletics that mirrors, it's called the Freshman Foundation. It mirrors the original intent of the podcast, where it's like there's this course content that's designed to coach you and help you self develop yourself to get ready for that jump to college. And that they're linked, although I've done a terrible job of linking them. So I also want to get back to that focus of transitions and having the podcast be about being able to navigate and be ready for what's to come in the future when we don't really think about that, or maybe we don't do a good job of preparing. So I have a course. I love my course, and I've done a very poor job of monetizing that as well. But the podcast has helped me a lot with building a personal brand, right? Like people know what I stand for. They know what my content's about. They like me, and I get coaching clients through that and I get positive feedback through it. So it's really helped with my coaching business. It hasn't helped as much with sort of these more passive streams of income, if you
Yeah.
will.
Great answer. No, I understand. Tell everybody a little bit, if you don't mind, about the program. I mean, I've had two boys. I've had my daughter actually did too, but both my boys went through that transition of scholarships and looking at
Mhm.
colleges and the whole nine yards, and they went through it very heavy. And so there's a lot there. The course that you do, I assume it focuses on the athlete and how it
Yes.
so just tell us, like, you don't want to give away the secret sauce, but at least give us an idea of what it addresses. Like if I have a kid who's transitioned into college for a
Yep.
sport, what am I looking to your course to help me with?
Yeah. So there's five key elements in the course, and this I came up with this through researching, like academic research, through the interviews I did on the podcast, like what I learned from people in the field who are more experienced and savvy than I was, and then the work I was doing with athletes myself. So like sort of like an amalgam of all that sort of research and experience. And the five things that came up were growth mindset, meaning like, hey, I'm the best in high school. Am I going to be able to be okay with it when I'm not better than everybody else? Am I going to be able to look at this as an opportunity to grow versus a judgment on my like standing in the world? Resilience, can I bounce back from failure because there's going to be more of it? Resourcefulness, meaning do I know where to get the help and how to go ask for it? Confidence, which is pretty much self-explanatory, and then building a support network. How do I surround myself with the right people in a new place that help me be my best rather than just latching on to people and then getting caught up in maybe these new networks that they're not exactly going to allow me to thrive because I'm around the wrong people. So it was really
Wow.
like geared towards thinking about like how do I get myself ready for those challenges of going off in essence and living on my own and doing a job as an athlete for the first time in my life.
Nice. That sounds incredibly useful for kids in that in that time frame, especially. So now, when do you start working with kids on that? Because I know sometimes it's junior year, they're looking at where they're going, everything else. At what point do you sort of begin that process of working with them?
Well, you know, I would say that the sooner the better, but I think the reality of the situation based on my experiences is it's all based on urgency, right? We don't think, even parents, I don't think I need this until I need it. So I've actually had people feedback to me like, hey, like I would do this, like this is something that we would have bought in like the first year of college because it's like we don't really know that it's going to be a problem, which I need to better do a better job of like sort of marketing and selling on that element of like, hey, you need to prepare for this. But even when I get there, like, how do I navigate this transition? I'd be willing to buy it. And then the price point part of it, I've had feedback of like, hey, like this is really valuable, but I'm not sure I would have paid the amount that you're asking for. So like that's also been kind of a sticking point. But I think the summer before college is really where I envisioned it being the place where athletes would access it because you're getting ready, it's urgent, and you have the time. You're not like going, you're done with your senior year of high school, and you've got that 6 to 8 weeks in that. If you do one module a week, you're preparing yourself for leaving in August, right? But again, it's not as simple as that. So there's like some fluidity to it in terms of what people are willing to do based on the urgency and the perceived need.
I mean, that's great. That, and yeah, they're done with their high school stuff. They haven't started their college stuff yet. They're probably talking to coaches or something at that point, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and sort of feeling things out, but they do actually have a couple of minutes. If you can get them away from their girlfriends long enough, I suppose it would work out. But sorry,
Yes,
I had two boys. I digress.
I understand.
So I love what you're doing, always have. And this is really interesting hearing about what you're doing with the podcast and how you're doing it, and the whole nine yards. I always try to fit in my corny question with everybody. And so I'm going to hit you with it. I can't wait to hear your answer for it. So get ready. Strap on
I'm
your seatbelt.
listening.
Here we go.
Okay.
What is it about doing your podcast that you love the most? And what is it about doing your podcast that you just absolutely hate the most?
Uh, I would say I love the most. I love asking questions. I'm curious. That is my one of my biggest strengths is being curious, like really like listening to someone tell me something and then like digesting it and then asking the follow up. I'll even be more. I love follow up questions. Like, hey, I want to know more about that. Like, let's get into the weeds. Like, I'm big on like going deep. I'm not good at like surface. I would get there, but like, let's go deep. That's my favorite part. The least favorite part, I think, is just figuring out how to use the content to market, right? There's so much of it. How do I choose what's valuable? Where do I put it? How do I write the copy? How do I do a schedule? Like just that, like that labor intensive. Now I'm doing it all myself is trying to figure out a system that works for me, but it's not so like lazy that it's not valuable, right? So that's the hardest part for me is just using the content wisely and putting it in the right place and making sure that people are getting the most out of it. That's the hardest part for me. The interview stuff is great. Like it's my favorite. I love it.
That's great. That's great. All right. You fielded that just fine. See, look at that. All right. Um, I usually say this just towards the end because it's kind of a new question to what I've been asking
Okay.
folks, and that is, how do you, or do you, if you do, what role does AI play in what you're doing, and how are you utilizing it, and that type of thing.
Yeah. So I am familiarizing myself with AI. It has been, generally speaking, extremely helpful. So the platform that I'm using for podcasting has AI functionality that's quite good. So it creates clips from the podcast based on the AI algorithm that tend to be pretty good. And I have to do a little manual edit and a manual like scrutiny, but the clips are usually pretty good. So like that part is good. And then when I write my copy for my promotion, I'm using AI based on the transcripts and the questions that I ask it to get at least a raw format for like a social media post for Facebook. And then I will again human edit it to make sure that it meets matches my voice, and then I put it out there. So it does save me a lot of time, but it's not. I would rather write everything from scratch. It's just it saves me so much time. I find it to be valuable. I don't have a visceral hate of AI. I'm learning how to use it to my standards and my advantage, and not letting it do everything.
Yeah.
But it's definitely cutting a lot out. It's the middle. It's cutting out the middleman, and I'm getting to the end faster. And so I'm developing a system I feel like I'm comfortable with. Is it ideal? No, but it's good enough. I feel good about it. I put in the work to make sure it matches who I am and what I want to share, but it like cuts out so much time. It's been really positive.
Nice. Nice. Well, I appreciate all the information you've given us today. You've been doing the podcast for a while, and you've had like ups and downs. You've kind of been through it, and you're coming out the other side, and you're reinvigorated, ready to rock and roll.
Yeah.
For newer folks, who have gone through some of the stuff, or maybe they're kind of getting ready to ramp up, is there a particular hosting site or piece of equipment or maybe video system, any of those things that you've used that you really like that you want to maybe recommend just to anybody who's out there looking for that type of thing?
Yeah. So the platforms I've used different hosting sites.
Hmm.
I started with Zoom. I moved to Zencaster and now I'm on Riverside, which I'm really happy with. All of them were fine, right? So, like, I think it's a personal preference based upon what you want to accomplish. Like, I don't have a strong opinion other than use what works for you, try different things. They're all reasonable enough from a cost perspective that you can kind of bounce around and try new things. What I would 100% advocate for or like shill for is this mic that I'm using, Shure MV7, 249.99. It's been great to me, right? It was a good investment. People like my sound. I like it. It's been great. The mic, I've learned about mic. I've done, and we haven't talked about this, but I've done different podcasting coaching. I did, somebody showed me how to use the mic, and somebody showed me how to like do my sound treatments, and like learning about the audio editing part of it, the dynamics of it. Mic is so important. How to use my mic and getting a good one has been a game changer for me. I feel really good about it. and getting a good mic and one that works for you and that makes you feel good about the way you sound.
Yeah.
And like it's mic is a game changer.
Nice. That's exactly what I was looking for. What was really important to you, what really impacted you. So,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for that answer too. I love that, man. As we kind of start wrapping this up here a little bit, there are all sorts of new folks out there who listen to this right now. We have a big chunk of new podcasters who are either thinking of starting or have just started, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you've kind of been through it, and so you've got a really good firsthand perspective of podcasting, and doing it yourself and learning some things the hard way. And you're still here and you're going strong. So
Yeah.
what's kind of advice, maybe your best, one or two things can you tell folks who are in that spot? They're new or they're getting ready to start. What are the best things you can tell them to make it to get to that plateau of 100 episodes at some point?
Yeah. So I think for me, I'll speak for myself. Setting up a podcast that means something to you, that's important to you, that you are passionate about is a trite and overused. But like I love the conversations I have about the work that I do. So for me, it doesn't feel like I'm just putting out content to to generate a result. There is a genuine interest in the conversations I'm having. So it doesn't feel like I'm only focused on the end game. I think that's number one. Two, I would say, based on the experience and some of the things we've talked about, don't be afraid to be creative, try new things. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm a perfectionist when it comes to these things. So I've really learned to let go and just be like, hey, if it's not exactly the same as the last episode, or it's not perfect, or there's a glitch, or there's a an or an in the audio, who cares? It's your podcast. Let it be authentic. Try different stuff. And if people connect to you, it's going to work. It doesn't have to be flawless. That is the other thing I would absolutely say.
Nice. I love that. Thank you for sharing that stuff and for everything that you've shared today, man.
Thank you.
I want to make sure that we got everything because I mean you do a lot of stuff. So is there anything that I didn't ask you? Anything that we missed? Anything that you want to make sure you put out there? Um, why don't you go ahead and give your contact info? For like how can somebody reach you for and all this to connect with you about what it is you do. But then also, any parting thoughts or something that, I didn't cover or anything like that, make sure we get that thrown out there. So, contact info and parting thoughts, brother.
So contact info, I'll just give you my direct email, Michael at ftbfranktombobcoaching.com. And you can contact me if you have questions about podcasting. You were connected to what I was saying. You want to know something more. I'll share all the good and the bad. I want to help people. That's why I do what I do in my work. I want to help people enjoy the journey. I'm willing to do that. Um, Check out my newsletter if you're interested in the content of sports psychology, michaelvhuber.com/newsletter. I'm a better writer than I am a podcaster, I think, in my humble opinion. So I love to write. That's another thing I love to do. And getting better. I think getting better at connecting my newsletter to my podcast, we haven't really talked about, is something I want to do because I love my newsletter and I feel like I really connect with people there. I want to get better at leveraging them off of each other. And I'm not doing a great job of that right now. So that's another thing that I think as a maybe a point that like just sort of a closing point. I think there's a lot of opportunity there that I'm missing in terms of leveraging one off the other and growing the audience that way.
Yeah. I love that the overall idea, though, that you're putting out for everybody is that everything sort of leverages everything. Make sure that you're completely interconnected. If you've got a podcast, if you've got a
Yep.
newsletter, whatever it is, make sure it's all connected. Everything's touching each other.
Yeah.
So, that way you're making the most of every platform you're on. And that's great, great advice, brother. So,
Thank you.
all right, man. I'll tell you what, host of the Freshman Foundation podcast, Michael Huber, thank you for joining us today, for putting everything out there, all the honest answers and all the help, man. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you again.
Same, Rory. Thank you so much for having me. I love being here.
Thanks, man. Folks, that's been another awesome episode of the Podcaster Nation. And the reason we get these fantastic people on here talking about all these awesome things is because this is the podcast that's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And folks, we showed again today, this is the place where the rising tide truly raises all ships. So keep sailing.